What's up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Coach, the hangover after the draft should be out of the way, right? You're good?
I'm not hungover, Jeff. I'm feeling good, man. I'm ready to talk about this.
Yeah, I think that for me, there does feel like just a giant exhale after the draft. Like there's so much anticipation for it, and I think there's more anticipation for the draft than there is regular season playoff games. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like this standalone event that there's so much buildup towards and so much speculation. And you and I being on the content creation end of it, spend so much time immersed in it. And then in 3 days, it's over. You're right. And it's just sort of like, oh, okay. And now on to what's next.
All right. So in case it's your first time checking out the program, we do 5 topics and we do a profile at the very end. Let's start with our first topic. With the dust having settled on the NFL draft, finish the sentence. One thing we learned from the 2025 NFL draft is that I'll let you go first.
Mel Kiper really likes Shedeur Sanders. No, I'm not going to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But I think I will talk about quarterbacks. I think we learned that teams are putting a lot of stock in next year's quarterback class because there were several quarterback needy teams that passed on QBs in the first round. And that's not been the recent trend. A year ago, 6 out of the first 12 picks were quarterbacks. 2 years ago, 3 out of the first 4 were quarterbacks. And some of those guys were projects. You go back 2 years ago, right? And you got Bryce Young taken first overall that Carolina moved a mountain to acquire. And that was a gamble because Bryce Young is like 5'11 and 195 pounds. And then you had Anthony Richardson, who you and I have talked about before, who very limited experience. He got taken 4th overall. It seemed as though 2 years ago, teams were willing to take a chance on developmental guys. Well, this past year, they didn't, right? You had Cam Ward go number 1 overall. You didn't have another quarterback picked until number 25. And what has history shown us? History has shown us that overwhelmingly, you find your franchise guy, your franchise quarterback at the top of the first round. And that once you get into the 20s and later, I mean, there are exceptions, but the rule has been these are now projects. And we had one quarterback taken in the top 20. I think that tells us that there were teams who needed quarterbacks that were willing to wait and said, we're going to patchwork it this year and figure it out a year from now.
I think that's a really good answer. And I have two. I have 2 answers to this question. The first is that hopefully, and I wrote this article for SteelCurtainNetwork.com over the weekend, hopefully fans of any team out there realize that these national pundits don't really know. they really don't know. Whether you're talking about Mel Kiper or Field Yates, any of them, there's some like Daniel Jeremiah who seems a little bit more clued in than others, but they really don't know. And so people that just cling to every word that's written and said from these people that they claim themselves to be experts, I don't think that they really are. And they don't have a good feel for what the individual team wants to do. And the Steelers are a perfect example. How many podcasts were you on, Kevin, where we talked about how the Steelers are going to go defensive line unless they're all gone? And yet there are people parroting over and over again, they're going to take a quarterback. They're going to take a quarterback. It's exhausting, right?
Yeah, they look at need and they just automatically decide that this makes sense for this particular team. Whereas the people who cover the teams more locally, like we do with the Steelers, are a bit more clued in. I also think there's this. Two things real quick. One, you get guys like Mike Tomlin who do throw up smoke screens. Yep. I mean, he showered praise on a bunch of different quarterbacks there. And then I don't think the teams themselves know for sure until very late in the evaluation process. There's a lot to evaluate. And there's a lot that between the combine and then the pro days. And then I think the thing, if we learn one thing from the Shedeur Sanders drama, it was that the interviews matter. And those interviews, they don't wrap up until like 2 weeks before the draft. So yeah. I think teams are not finalizing their boards until very late in this process, which means that gaining access to what they really want to do is tough.
And they'll never turn down an opportunity to get more information. So if top 30 visits or pre-draft visits stop a week before the draft, they're going to use every single tool to their disposal to try and learn about these prospects. Now, the other part that I wanted to answer to this sentence, or to complete the sentence, was some teams just cannot get out of their own way. And you see it all the time. I did a podcast, my golf podcast. And after we finished recording, the guy's like, "Hey, I see your terrible talent. I'm actually a Cleveland fan." I said, "My gosh, I can't get away from Browns fans." And he said, he was laughing. He goes, "I just want 1 year, man. Just give me 1 year." I said, "But then there's teams that they do stuff repeatedly. And you're like, man, what are they doing?" Whether it's ownership, whether it's general manager, whether it's a combination of both. You can talk about, sending Baker Mayfield off for nothing, and then did this Deshaun Watson contract, which turned out to be a unbelievably horrible decision. You could talk about the Carolina Panthers taking Ted McMillan in the top 10. Everyone's like, really? Like, they have a lot of needs on defense too. Why would they take a wide receiver? I just feel like there are some teams, some organizations that just, they cannot get out of their own way. I don't know. What's your take?
And that's especially true when it comes to the draft, because some teams really know how to work and manage the draft. Take Philadelphia. Philadelphia always seems to be able to get a guy, or at least I shouldn't say always, but in their recent history, last 8-10 years, to be able to get a guy who fits their scheme perfectly, fits their need. Sometimes they get aggressive and move up to do it. Sometimes they sit where they are. Philadelphia is the biggest city close to me, so I'm surrounded by Philadelphia media. The idea that they were able to get Jihad Campbell with the 31st pick to them was just amazing. Like, they never thought they'd have a shot at this guy, and they moved up 1 pick to get him. I think he's a great upside player, and just an example of how the Eagles in the last decade or so have really figured out the draft. And then teams like the Browns, you look at their quarterback strategy, and it's baffling. If it's by design, it's baffling. And if it's not by design, then it feels like it's throwing darts.
Yeah. And I would even go as far as there was a clip I saw, Eric DeCosta, who's the GM of the Baltimore Ravens. He had a video that was circulating out on Twitter, and he's talking about, hey, there's no guarantee in the NFL draft, whether you're talking first round or 7th round. He said, I'm trying to get as many picks as I can, because I'm trying to get as many bullets of ammunition that I can to get these things right. And he's exactly right. And then you see there are these teams that just throw away draft picks like it's nothing. And so it is funny how there's a differing approach to the draft, and there's no way anyone in their right mind can say there's not a correlation between the teams that are successful and the teams that consistently struggle year in and year out. So, all right, let's go to our next topic. Did the NFL draft shift the balance of power in the NFL at all? Are there any teams you feel significantly altered their prospects one way or another in the draft?
I don't think it shifted at the top. I think the best teams from 2024 are still the best teams. Teams like Washington are certainly ascending. They made a big acquisition in the Laramie Tunsil trade. But as far as really improving your prospects in the draft, I think you saw it most in this particular draft with the bad teams, the teams that were bad in 2024, who maybe now have used the draft to elevate themselves to mediocrity, for lack of a better way of explaining it. But look at like New England. They had a really aggressive offseason with free agent signings, and then they plugged 2 of their biggest needs at offensive tackle and running back with what I think are 2 of the best picks in the whole draft: Will Campbell, the tackle from LSU, and Trevion Henderson from Ohio State. I think they really did a nice job of acquiring high-level talent at positions of need. I think Vegas with Ashton Genty, perfect fit for what they want to do. I like their pick in the 2nd round, Jack Beck, the wide receiver, a tough guy who will block. Seems like he fits a Pete Carroll offense. But you look at the Giants, they are loading up on the defensive line. They get Abdul Carter, who might be the best player in this whole draft. They get Darius Alexander, who is another defensive lineman that can get after it. Why are they loading up on the D-line? Well, because they got to go up against the Eagles offense, the Commanders offense, the Cowboys offense. Those are all smart moves. So I think you saw some of the bad teams get better, but not necessarily to the point where they're going to be competitive for a championship.
Yeah, this is when, and I agree with you, I don't see much shifting here. For me, I look at it and say that they've acquired the players, but that's only half of the process. Can they now get them into a position, whether it's with the coaching staff, the scheme fit, to put them in a position to succeed on the field? And that's also the haves and the have-nots. When you look at the teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, they're very well coached. They run their scheme to near perfection. You're talking about teams like the Giants, and they've struggled. They've struggled on offense. And you've got the super talented Malik Neighbors, and who's going to be throwing him the football? He's asked that question already this offseason. So I think that this draft, and again, we always look on paper and say, man, like you're right. The Patriots did hit it out of the ballpark. But is it going to take some time? Is it going to take these players half a year, maybe a full season until they actually are able to be impact players? I don't know. And I didn't realize how many players the Eagles had lost from last season. And so their draft class was needed. I think they're very, very good. So, Coach, what's your take on that? Anything?
Well, I think as far as the coaching goes, you look at a team like New England, and they are in a much better position from a head coach standpoint this year with Mike Vrabel, who had success in Tennessee. And obviously his history in New England makes him a pretty good fit for their culture versus last year when they were taking a flyer on an unproven first-year head coach who struggled to master a lot of the responsibilities that go with that. So pairing these good draft picks with a veteran coach like Vrabel who knows how to develop them should be beneficial, at least for New England.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. And I always forget that Gerard Mayo only had 1 year in New England, and that was, we'll call it a dud. We'll put it that way. So we'll see how that goes up there in the Northeast. But let's do one last draft note, our third topic. It was announced that Washington, D.C. will host the 2027 draft, with rumors already circulating that the league wants to hold the event on the National Mall. Next year's draft has already been awarded to Pittsburgh. What do you think of the draft locations for the next 2 years?
I love that they're moving it around now. That was awesome. 200,000 people in Green Bay. I mean, Green Bay's not an easy place to get to.
Right.
So 200,000 people in Green Bay. I'll be shocked if there aren't more than that in Pittsburgh next year. DC, my goodness. You live in Maryland. I just drove to Charleston, South Carolina, and spent 2 hours in DC traffic, stuck there on I-95. It took me 2 hours to go from one side of DC to the other coming home. I mean, just logistically, that is going to be challenging. But the optics of holding it on the mall there, if they pull that off, will be awesome. I mean, the NFL loves to entwine itself with patriotism. They love the military. They love the flyover. They love the flags. They love all that stuff. Oh my God, this is going to be like patriotism on steroids on the National Mall with the draft going on there.
I will say this, just speaking as a Maryland resident, someone that's been down to DC a bunch, they are going to have to utilize the metro system way more than driving into the city. And so it's going to be up to the end. If this happens, and there's no guarantee that it does happen, they're going to have to make sure the people that are wanting to come into the district for this draft don't drive in and try to park, take the metro. Find a line. So like for us, it's the Shady Grove exit, the red line. It's the closest. It's probably about 45 minutes from me. I can take the red line all the way in to downtown DC. That's what you're going to have to do. And I've done that a bunch. I've gone down to see a bunch of Penguins and Capitals games, and the metro can get crazy. It will be crazy for 3 days, but I agree with you. The optics will be awesome if it is held on the National Mall. Like it would be really, really awesome. I just wonder how many people will jump in the reflection pool at some point.
Depends how late in the draft we are, the correlation of, I think time and alcohol will probably relate. I will say this, when the draft was in Philly back in, was it 2017, maybe 2018? I went and we drove up towards Philly. We stopped outside the city on the Jersey side at a train station and took the train in. That was a trip, because you had fans of like every team on that train. And you may have heard this before, Jeff, but Philly fans are not subtle. Really? So when people, so when people wearing Dallas Cowboys or New York Giants jerseys got on the train, the heckling was both aggressive and creative. Very funny stuff, so that train ride was awesome because it was like a party of NFL fans with a little bit of mean-spirited in there, but for the most part, people were pretty good to each other.
Oh, for sure. And like I said, going down to Penguins and Capitals hockey games, like that's a really big rivalry in the NHL. And so every game I saw down in DC, the Penguins won. And you get back on the Metro and all these red jerseys, and I'm wearing my Penguins jersey. Like, I don't want to hear it. Don't say anything. Like, well, you're going to hear it for the whole trip till we
Mhm.
get to the end of this red line, just so you know. But what about Pittsburgh? You've been to Pittsburgh. I grew up about 45 minutes out of Pittsburgh. I've interviewed people that are kind of in the know with this, and I just, for the life of me, don't know where they're going to put everyone. They're going to want to have it on the North Shore, which is where both stadiums, PNC Park and Acrisure Stadium, are. And it's just, my gosh, like for all the people that are probably going to descend into that city, I'm not sure how they're going to work it. Pittsburgh is a really unique town because, well, you have the three rivers and everything is broken up, and there's not just this sprawling area where you can just say, we'll just have the stage here and we can have people go back as far as the eye can see. That's not the case. Now, they're going to be using Acrisure Stadium for some things I heard. They're going to have the parking lot between the two stadiums encompassed by the draft and different events. I don't know, Coach. What do you think about Pittsburgh next year?
What's the name of the park there, right at the confluence that comes to a point where
Point
the three
Park.
river Point Park?
Yeah.
I don't know how many people you can get into Point Park, but that would be a cool visually. That would be a really cool spot to have it. But I don't know if that, like you said, logistically, if you can make that work. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I've been to Pittsburgh many times. I don't know the city as well as you guys, but it is. It's an old city, and the
Yeah.
old cities, especially the manufacturing cities, weren't built with the notion of like open space in mind. So the modern, you go out west. My sister lives in Tempe, Arizona. Those cities are designed and engineered completely differently. So yeah, that will be a logistical challenge.
I'm curious. They haven't finalized anything. The last person I spoke to in regards to where they're going to have things, I'm sure that'll be done soon as they try and get prepared for 2026. But like you said, the industrial, age, everything was along the river. And so
Yep.
you had trains, you had barges. That was the main way to get goods up and down the country. And so, yeah, that's why the city of Pittsburgh, it's going to be awesome. I think Steeler fans are going to be, obviously they'll be well represented, but I think they'll actually do a good job in hosting the event. I plan on being there. I think we're going to have a Fans First Sports Network kind of event, and it should be a lot of fun. But I do think DC is going to be amazing if they end up doing that. It's just going to be awesome.
It'll certainly look cool, no doubt about
Yeah.
that.
Did you hear about the Commanders supposedly getting a new stadium? They're going to use the RFK site in downtown
RFK,
DC.
yeah,
That's
more
crazy.
traffic, baby. You know, like,
Get used to the Metro. All right, let's go to the next one. Rookie mini camps begin this week. Mini camps are pretty basic with lots of drills and shorts and an emphasis on learning the playbook. But for some rookies, this will be a particularly important week. Which rookies are the most intriguing to you as minicamp gets underway?
well, in the absence of these high-profile quarterbacks, because that's usually the main attraction, I think your interest now shifts to players like Travis Hunter. You know, like what are they going to do with him? They've said that he's going to be used primarily as a wide receiver. That they may let him play some situational defensive back. I would think that Travis Hunter in minicamp will probably get a little bit of reps on both sides of the ball. That would be interesting to see. A guy I'm really interested in. How's it going to work out in LA with Omarion Hampton, the running back? Because the Chargers signed Najee Harris. And I think people just thought, hey, that's their guy, right? They'll build, maybe they'll bring back J.K. Dobbins. Maybe they'll take a running back later in the draft to pair with Najee Harris. But Najee's going to be the guy. And then they spend their first overall pick on Omarion Hampton. And that absolutely had to raise some eyebrows, none higher than Najee Harris's. So it'll be really interesting to see. You're not going to learn a lot about these players at minicamp, but if you get these reports coming out of LA that Omarion Hampton looks amazing, he looks like the primary back, etc. That'll make for an interesting storyline going forward.
I don't put too much stock into the rookie mini camps or mini camps in general. More so, I guess, mandatory mini camp than anything else. But for me, I look at this and I'm looking at players that might have been a little banged up heading into the draft. So Abdul Carter, Like, how much does he participate? Does he participate at all? Do they just let him rest? And they're like, look, this is not important. We're more focused on the regular season. Okay. Tells us maybe a little bit of the significance of the injury. Also, I would say that Derek Hartman of the Pittsburgh Steelers, first round pick, he had I guess they said it was a slightly torn rotator cuff muscle. Okay. If he's out there participating, well, that's a great sign. That means that he's at least able to do some drills and he's not going to be hindered by that early on. So I look for that type of stuff because I've fallen for the football in shorts way too many times. Like it's again to stick to the Steelers. Will Howard's ripping the ball over the field. He looks like the starter. You get really excited, and then it comes to find out he's not even going to play this year. So, let me ask you this as a coach: what takeaways can you have from football in shorts outside of like what we just talked about?
The major takeaways aren't going to be things that you and I see. Will Howard better look good because this is the best situation he's ever going to get, running some skeleton against fellow rookies and undrafted free agents. I mean, Minkah Fitzpatrick isn't going to be back there roaming the secondary.
Right.
So if you're a young guy, this is a layup for you, or should be anyway. The things that, you really won't see that will matter a lot to the coaches will be things like, how well do these young quarterbacks digest the playbook? Simple things. Can they get a call executed in the huddle? Do they know the terminology? Can they command the huddle? If they come up to the line of scrimmage and guys aren't lined up right, can they redirect them to get them lined up properly? If they get shown a blitz look early on, do they understand enough about how we want to make an adjustment to change the protection? Like, that's the stuff that won't get reported and we won't hear much about. But that if you're a coach and your young QB who you just drafted does a nice job with those types of things, then you feel pretty good.
How much, if you had to guess, how much of the playbook do you think rookies are getting for the rookie minicamp?
So when Joe Callahan was on my Call Sheet podcast, Joe was an undrafted free agent who wound up making 4 or 5 NFL rosters. He spent a couple of years in Green Bay when Aaron Rodgers was there. So he comes in as an undrafted free agent. And in his rookie minicamp, he literally held it up on the podcast. They had an install. The binder was probably 5 inches thick.
Jeez.
And then he told me they got a separate one like that for training camp that was even thicker. And then each week of the regular season, they got an additional binder that was 5 inches thick for that opponent. So it is mind-boggling how much they have to digest.
Now, as a football guy, would you say that, let's talk about quarterbacks. If a quarterback's looking at the playbook, there's probably a lot of things he already knows. It's just different terminology, right?
100%.
Oh, I ran that in college. I just need to know that it's Ringo instead of Tango. And so it's just, so there's a lot of it that is already committed to memory, but it's also, you talked about from this quarterback class, like the quarterbacks that can command a huddle. It won't happen in rookie minicamp, but when mandatory minicamp rolls around and you have veterans in the huddle, it's always probably, I would love to be a fly on the wall to be able to watch are they stumbling over their words? Are they able to get it out clearly? Are they able to command the huddle? I do love that type of stuff because I think it's part of the team building aspect that we're not privy to unless you get it access like Hard Knocks or something like that. So, all right, let's go to our 5th topic. Interesting move by Dallas Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer. He rearranged the lockers of all the players in the team's locker room and strategically placed Dak Prescott next to Micah Parsons. Can we read anything into this move, and what does it tell you about Schottenheimer's motives? I didn't hear about this, so I'll be anxious to get your take.
Yeah, I thought this was a little interesting nugget. That doesn't mean a whole lot in the big picture, but it shows you a couple things. One, Brian Schottenheimer, new head coach, coming in and putting his stamp on the locker room. Essentially what he's saying is this: don't get comfortable. I want guys to be a little bit uncomfortable. And if that discomfort is as subtle as you gotta, have your locker next to somebody else that you're going to need now to talk to and get to know, maybe a little team building thing going on there, then fine. That's what I want. Supposedly at their first meeting, he let everybody come in and sit down where they wanted. And then he made everybody stand up, go to the front of the room, and then select new seats next to different people. So that's teacher stuff. Those are things that you and I probably did as teachers to like, okay, let's get everybody to know each other. So it sounds like he's trying to reestablish the culture to a degree. And it's interesting that he's putting Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons next to each other, because unquestionably those are the two biggest leaders of this football team. But they're also two guys that have had, I don't want to say their own issues, but there's been a lot of like talk about their contracts and a lot of off-field discussion about them. And maybe this is like, hey, look, man, you two need to get on the same page about how to command this locker room and lead this football team. And let's not worry about any of the outside noise, et cetera. So that's a very subtle move, but for a first-year head coach, I like it.
So this is just a follow-up question. Did they not have lockers next to anyone? Did they have their own stalls that were separated from the rest of the team? Do you know that?
No, it sounds like they were next to other players, just not next to each other.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this sounds like Icebreakers 101 from the education manual. You're back to school, you're meeting all the new teachers, and you have to go sit at a table. You don't know someone's like, oh my gosh.
Oh my God, I know. I'm
sure that the players probably feel the same way. They're probably like, are you serious? I got to go sit next to someone I don't know. And I know, to me, this is all optics. This is all like, it's going to be a good story, but I don't.
But I will say this, Jeff. We in our football program, in our off-season training, the beginning of the off-season program, for the first several weeks, we let guys form their own lifting groups, and then you get about 3-4 weeks in, and we get an opportunity to assess. All right, well, what groups are really working hard? What groups are finishing all the reps, doing a good job? Who are the slackers? Who are the guys we need more out of? And we get about 3-4 weeks in, and we rearrange all the groups, and we'll take a kid who's, maybe one of our better players, but doesn't necessarily love the weight room. And he's now gravitated to a group of other kids who don't necessarily love the weight room, and they're giving you about a 70% effort. And we'll take that kid and we'll now put him in with the grinders and the dudes that will not let you miss a rep, et cetera, because it's a way to elevate. So in that sense, maybe this is what Schottenheimer's thinking. Like, look, we got to elevate the culture here, because we all know Dallas's culture is broken. And maybe he sees this as a first step in fixing it.
We shall see. We shall see. So let's finish this show up like we always do, a player profile. You want to talk about Ike Taylor. That's right. The former Steelers defensive back. We used to call him Stone Hands Ike Taylor, because he just did not have, my brother always says it, defensive backs, if they could catch, they'd be wide receivers. So Coach, what do you want to say about Ike?
It's Ike's birthday. I want to say happy birthday to Ike Taylor. So it's Ike Taylor's birthday, and he is one of my all-time favorite Pittsburgh Steelers from purely an entertainment perspective. There were very few players who were more entertaining, particularly on Sunday night or Monday Night Football, when they brought everybody, they got their 3 seconds to introduce themselves on the screen, and you'd say, Kevin Smith, safety, Gettysburg College, whatever you would say. And Ike Taylor, his tagline was Ike Taylor, swaggin'. It was such a great line. And, and I think he was a pioneer, because he spawned all these other guys that now they identify themselves from their middle school or whatever it might be. But you're right. He was, if Ike Taylor could catch, he'd probably be in the Hall of Fame. But he's a member of 2 Super Bowl teams in Pittsburgh, and really one of the last great corners that franchise has had. He
definitely agree with you 100%. He's not like Mel Blount, but he was a good serviceable cornerback for a long time.
Yep.
I think he was the last player and that embodied that era, that was that the team is bigger than everything else. And when you would listen to Ike, there's probably a lot of people that are very stereotypical in terms of, well, Ike talks funny and, he says swagging you, and he always does the John Cena, you can't see me, when he makes a big pass breakup. But this is a guy that was beloved by team president and ambassador to Ireland, Dan Rooney. Ike would talk about going into Dan Rooney's office and laying on his couch, and he would just talk to Dan Rooney, and Dan Rooney would let him sleep there sometimes and just leave. And he retired the same year as Troy Polamalu, because he said, if my brother's done, I am too. And so that was kind of like the last bit of that team and those great defenses. Ike Taylor, I definitely would have him in the top 5 of cornerbacks and Steelers history. And big happy birthday. Any final thoughts on Ike Taylor?
No, I just loved him. Loved watching him. He was a team guy, not a me first guy. You're right about all that. And happy birthday, Ike. I hope you're doing something fun.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Coach, go ahead and plug your Call Sheet Daily podcast.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation on Monday with a guy named Marcus Hartman, football coach at a high school in Philadelphia, but he's the founder of a company called NLG, Next Level Greats, that does football training, and they are a national champion on the 7-on-7 circuit. We got into a really interesting conversation about, does 7-on-7 football actually help in the development of young athletes, or does it actually hurt their development? That was an interesting conversation. We're talking about today on the program. Today is the anniversary of Roger Bannister being the first human being to run a sub 4-minute mile, which is a record that only stood for a short period of time, but was an incredible achievement. And today on the show, we're talking about what are the greatest records in NFL history.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I'll be checking that out. Make sure you check it out wherever you get your podcast by searching the Call Sheet Daily with Coach Kevin Smith. But that does it for another NFL Whip Round. Coach, thanks for your time. We'll see you next week, everyone. Take it easy.